Hey everyone, it's Jack from Cultaholic.com. Well, it's time to talk about the New Japan Pro Wrestling / Ring of Honor G1 Supercard. A long show, a grueling show, but also a show with definite high points throughout as well. Not a perfect show, there were weak parts as well, but we're going to cover all of that because this is what happened at the G1 Supercard. And as well, before we begin to, obviously this is a night where the headlines are going to be dominated by the fact that Bret Hart sadly got attacked by a fan at the Hall of Fame ceremony for WWE. All that we've really got to say about that is obviously that it was a disgraceful thing to do, and we're really glad that both Bret and Natalya, who were in the ring at the same time, were totally fine by that, and props to Bret for carrying on his speech afterwards. But let's focus on some actual wrestling, and let's talk, as I say, about the New Japan / Ring of Honor G1 Supercard. So we start things off with the one pre-show match, which was the Honor Rumble, featuring various different guys. Kenny King was in at number 1, Minoru Suzuki was in at number 2, getting a huge pop from the Madison Square Garden crowd. And we also had some surprise entrants, most notably Haku, and the final entrant, which was insane, the Great Muta. Now obviously the other big star of this match was Jushin Thunder Liger, who was retiring next January, and he made it to the final 2 actually, or so we thought. Himself and the Great Muta squaring off, everyone was losing their minds, and then Kenny King had slipped out of the ring during the end game of the match, I suppose, when people were still getting eliminated, slithered back in like a proper heel and eliminated both Muta and Liger to win the match. Oh dear. It wasn't the best or the cleanest Rumble you're ever going to see, but for a pre-show thing, I think it was fun enough to make quite a lot of sense and hopefully encourage some people to buy the main show. Next up, the first match of the main portion of the show, Will Ospreay, the never openweight champion, versus Jeff Cobb, the Ring of Honor TV champion, and the winner, of course, would win both belts. They'd take the loser's belt and be a double champion. This was a really high energy, great choice of a match to start the show and to get the crowd hot leading into the rest of the event, with both men looking great and working really well together. Ospreay and Cobb both have a really interesting clash of styles, and I think it led to some really cool spots. The coolest one probably being when Ospreay went for the Oscutter off the ropes, was thrown into the corner by Cobb, but Ospreay landed on the second rope and jumped straight back into another Oscutter and got a really good near fall. That was an excellent moment. One of many high points during the match, really. It was one of the stronger matches on the card. But also, at least in my opinion, we had a surprising result with Jeff Cobb actually picking up the victory over Ospreay with a huge slam from the top rope and then a tour of the islands as well to pick up the clean pinfall. And now Jeff Cobb is both the never openweight and the Ring of Honor TV champion. Wow, that is a pretty huge result, and it's interesting to see what New Japan decide to do with Jeff Cobb as one of their champions. Also, it's going to be very interesting to see what they do with Will Ospreay now that he's titleless going forwards. But a great effort by both men and a really good match to start the main portion of the show. Next up, we had a match involving Rush from CMLL, obviously a member of the Los Ingobernables stable, versus Dalton Castle, former Ring of Honor World Champion, of course, and this lasted a matter of seconds. Dalton Castle had a huge, elaborate entrance, including having the boys as ring steps to help him get to the ring. The boys are, of course, his team of rotating sidekicks, I guess, who fan him during matches or encourage him when he needs to get a head of steam going and stuff. And it all didn't end very well for Dalton Castle, despite the help of the boys. One of the boys left his fan in the ring by accident, like they fanned Dalton Castle when he's feeling tired. Dalton went to pick it up and give it to the boy outside, and Rush just jumped him at the bell, hit him with several moves in the corner, and in a matter of seconds, pinned him to take the shockingly quick squash victory. After the match then, Rush, went away. He's won. Easy payday. He's won in about 20 seconds, and Dalton Castle looked furious and actually attacked 2 of the boys after the match. I think this can be considered a fully fledged heel turn for Dalton Castle, and as disappointing as it was to see him lose in such short order, I think this was, in a weird way, a wise piece of booking, because Dalton Castle's got a nice refresh. We're going to see what he's going to be like as a heel, and I think it could lead to a bit of a career resurgence. Next up, the Women of Honor title match between the champion Mayu Iwatani and Kelly Klein. Now, being brutally honest, right, this wasn't the best match on the show. It was mainly due to, well, 2 things really. First of all, there were a few kind of sloppy moments in the match, but also the crowd just weren't invested at all. Is that the fault of the women in the ring, or is that the fault of the way that Ring of Honor has kind of promoted their women's division so far? I think it's a mixture of both, because if you watch Ring of Honor, the women's division isn't really as much of a priority as it is in many other promotions. In fairness, the crowd did sort of get into it when Iwatani was making her big babyface comeback, including a huge crossbody from the top rope to the outside. That was pretty great. But eventually it was Kelly Klein who won, using several power moves in a row, pinning Iwatani for a shockingly clean victory, I might add, as well as the fact that Kelly Klein sent all of her entourage to the back as well, and pretty much gave kind of a babyface display in the end. After the pinfall and the exchange of the belt and everything, there was a big show of respect between the two competitors, and I thought, why are they turning Kelly Klein babyface? Here's why. So while Kelly Klein was in the ring celebrating her win, she was interrupted by Velvet Sky and Angelina Love, who of course were members of the same stable in Impact, the Beautiful People, the kind of heelish Mean Girls kind of stable. They were missing one regular member, Madison Rayne, who is now back with Impact Wrestling, so she probably couldn't get on the show, but they were joined by Mandy Leone, who looks to be the third member of their little group. As she was on commentary, headed down to the ring. It looked like she was going to save Kelly Klein, but instead she blindsided her and joined Angelina Love and Velvet Sky in the beatdown, which culminated in the drawing of like an anarchy symbol on Kelly Klein's forehead, which was then revealed to be like the logo for their new stable, which is called The Allure. Ooh. Once again, though, sadly, the crowd were like almost totally silent for this. It wasn't sort of the reaction I think anyone involved really desired, especially, I guess, the booking team, but hopefully they can build up a bit of steam as the new heel stable and really chase Kelly Klein for that Women of Honor World Championship. Next up we had Mega Ran, and this was really sad to see because honestly, we've met Mega Ran, a few of the guys from this channel, and he is the nicest guy, very talented, does some really cool raps based around sometimes professional wrestling, sometimes video games, sometimes just general nerd culture and that sort of thing, and he's a really talented and humble and awesome dude. And the crowd just weren't into him, man. They were booing him. They didn't want to see a musical performance in the middle of a wrestling show. How many times have we seen examples of this? In fairness, it did play into an ongoing storyline between a kind of a hatred that Bully Ray has for Mega Ran. He interrupted Mega Ran once again, beat him up a little bit, hit him with a chain, and Mega Ran rolled to the outside. And Bully Ray basically implied that earlier in the night, he had jumped Juice Robinson backstage to get out of his match with him. And he was like, oh, what a shame about Juice. And then he was interrupted by a familiar bit of theme music, and we saw the return of the previously injured Flip Gordon, who looked in bloody excellent shape, by the way. He looked, oh man, he's been in the gym quite a lot. He and Flip had a pretty short match, which was basically the sort of New York street fight rules that was meant to be between Bully Ray and Juice Robinson. They were using weapons and stuff, but after a minute or two, with Flip Gordon looking like he had the advantage, he was interrupted by Silas Young and Shane Taylor, fellow heels of Bully Ray's, who interrupted the match and helped out Bully, beating down Flip. But then Flip was saved by Mark Haskins and Juice Robinson, who'd recovered from the previous attack backstage. Then it became a six-man street fight, and the show received quite a nice welcome change of pace. Honestly, before the show, this was one of the matches I was looking forward to the least, but actually, it impressed quite a lot. It was a really fun, hardcore style brawl with some really good wrestling as well in it. Mark Haskins in particular looked great. If you've never seen him before, he's a real highlight of the UK scene, and I'm really glad that he signed with Ring of Honor. I think he's going to be great there. This match was a sign of that. And yeah, it was really cool to see. There were some really cool moments as well involving Flip Gordon, especially when he took a kendo stick to the back from each of the heels in turn. Kendo sticks just like shattering off his spine, and he was like, give me another one, come on. The babyfaces eventually got back in and saved Flip once again, and they did win the match in the end, each one hitting like a move in succession on an isolated Bully Ray. So we had Mark Haskins hitting the Devon Dudley, you know, what's up headbutt from the top. Then we had a spine buster from Juice, and then we had a nice 450 splash from Flip, and they all piled on Bully Ray for the big feel-good victory, which was nice to see, and a fun moment of the show in a match that I actually thought was going to be one of the more negative points. Next up, we had the triple threat match for the IWGP Junior Heavyweight Championship, with the champion Taiji Ishimori defending against both Bandido and Dragon Lee, and this was arguably one of the best matches on the show. You could say maybe the best match on the show. For me, it was held back a little bit by its short run time. It only went about sort of 8-9 minutes. It was certainly less than 10 minutes long, but everything that happened in it was so clean. I will say this was probably the most perfectly executed match on the card. So much fun. This match was wrestled at a pretty frightening pace, and all three guys looked absolutely tremendous in there at the very top of their respective games, especially Bandido, who at one point hit like a double moonsault sort of suplex with both men in his arms from the ropes to the middle of the ring. That's outrageous. Like, what a physical freak that man is. But Bandido didn't actually pick up the victory though. It was Dragon Lee becoming the new IWGP Junior Heavyweight Champion, pinning Bandido with Ishimori previously knocked outside of the ring. So he didn't pin the champion, but he did win the title. And Bandido was a gracious loser after the match, you know, putting the belt onto Dragon Lee and being like, you deserve it, man, you're the best, and all this sort of thing. And I was expecting Hiromu Takahashi to pop up on the Tron and challenge Dragon Lee further down the line. That didn't happen. We let Dragon Lee have his moment, but I think it might happen maybe a month or two down the line. I think we're going to see Hiromu come back and really gun for that title. Next up, the big old tag match, the winner-take-all match between the IWGP Tag Team Champions GOD, Tama Tonga and Tonga Loa, the Ring of Honor Tag Team Champions PCO and Brody King, part of Marty Scurll's stable. Also, we had Evil and SANADA representing LIJ, and finally the Briscoes as well. And yes, as I mentioned, the winner took both sets of belts. So this match, again, like the street fight, was one of those matches I thought, oh, this will kind of be filler on the show. I'm not going to enjoy this as much as some of the other matches. But really, I did enjoy this. There were lots of like huge moments, many of which involved PCO, who is a ridiculously tough individual. His entrance was him being brought to life by an electric chair, which was a bit hokey, but it was still really fun. And then PCO just went on to hit several moves where you thought, oh my god, he shouldn't be doing that, he's going to kill himself. There was a moonsault, there was like a cannonball senton kind of thing onto the apron. I think it was Mark Briscoe who got squashed by that. That was a terrifying looking move. But the most terrifying bit came towards the end when both members of GOD teamed up to throw PCO from the ring straight to the floor, a double powerbomb from the ring, over the top rope, straight to the floor, and PCO landed hard on the outside and then sat up like the bloody Undertaker. It was insane. He couldn't get back in the ring. He did sell it because he sat up and then he went, actually no, that did hurt quite a lot, and sat back down. And that led basically to GOD picking up the victory, hitting some moves on Brody King, PCO's tag team partner, and winning both sets of titles. A massive result for Tama Tonga and Tonga Loa, and a damn entertaining match as well, to be fair. I did enjoy this one. Then after the match, it was revealed that Toru Yano of the Chaos faction had stolen the IWGP tag team titles, presumably while the match was in progress. I didn't notice. And he stood at the ramp and went, haha, I've got your belt. And GOD went, you're a dick. We're going to feud with you in the near future, probably. That's not what everyone's going to remember from this, because at the same time as this occurring, something weird went on off camera. So as you've probably heard by now, if you checked any form of social media after this point during the show, two mysterious figures got involved in an altercation near the barricade and then over the barricade with the Briscoes, and eventually Bully Ray as well, who ran down from the back to join in. It was Enzo and Cass. So at the time, this seemed like a total shoot. It seemed like Enzo and Cass had turned up like Enzo did at Survivor Series and tried to crash the show. Apparently one of them threw like a beer or something at one of the Briscoes and they got into a brawl. And it all looked pretty legit because the camera didn't focus on it and we had this Toru Yano thing going on at the same time. It seemed like a total shoot. Basically, Enzo and Cass had a bit of a fight and then were escorted up by security, and we could see in the background from the commentary desk that Cass and Enzo were both flipping off the crowd on the ramp as they were like escorted away. Then, in the minutes that followed this, when we saw replays of it that were sent to us on Twitter and that sort of thing, it looked like a stiff kind of fight on the outside, but maybe a bit more of a worked one just because of how slow security were to intervene. If that was really like two guys jumping the barricade who had no business being there, security would have just been on them instantly. And that's not what happened. There was a lot of shouting back and forth. They got close enough to touch each other. There was a fight at ringside basically. And I'm just led to think from that this was actually a more cunning worked shoot. The reason I thought it was a shoot was because it took place at the same time as the Yano stuff, and I thought, well, they wouldn't book it so that it overshadowed actual storyline. Maybe they did, just to make it look more convincing. Voices of Wrestling, I believe, did a tweet during this where they said, just received a text from a source, this is 100% of work, upper management wanted it to happen, the booking staff just below upper management were against it, but upper management had their way. It'll be interesting to see, but if that's all true, it looks like Ring of Honor have signed Enzo and Cass. What's going to happen next is anyone's guess. Next up, Zack Sabre Jr. versus Hiroshi Tanahashi for the Rev Pro British Heavyweight Championship, which was in a very unfortunate spot. It was a good match, one of the better matches on the show technically, I'd say, which is always the case when Zack Sabre Jr. is involved, maybe the best technical wrestler in the world today, but it was in that tricky period just after the whole Enzo and Cass thing, and whether that was a work or a shoot, Zack and Tanahashi were going to have a hard time following that, just because it was such a wild moment. So yeah, it was slower paced at the start, and yes, it took the crowd a little bit longer to get into it, but both guys worked really hard and actually won the crowd over by the end. The other big thing to take away from this match is that they made Zack look really, really good, because Tanahashi a few months ago was IWGP Heavyweight Champion, one of the top guys in the wrestling world, and Zack Sabre Jr. hit all his stuff on him, all his tricky submissions, all his pinning predicaments, and Tanahashi was only just able to escape each one in the nick of time until eventually Zack trapped him in one of those like devilish submissions that he does. I think it might have been a modified version of his orienteering with Napalm Death, got it, submission, where he kind of hooked 3 limbs at once and left Tanahashi with no choice but to submit, and basically Zack retained the Rev Pro British Heavyweight Championship with a pretty dominant display over a guy who is one of the biggest names in world wrestling. Really good night for Zack, to be honest. Next up, the IC Championship match between Tetsuya Naito and Kota Ibushi. Maybe, on balance, all things considered, maybe my favourite match of the whole night. There were 1 or 2 kind of ragged moments throughout this match, but generally the whole thing was paced and structured excellently and built to a fever pitch. There was nothing quite as scary as their encounter last month in the New Japan Cup when they kind of were dropping each other on their head and stuff, and it was really gruesome to watch at times. There was, though, still a lot of neck-based offense, which just seems to be the thing that is defining this Ibushi and Naito feud, and it might be a bit controversial, it might be a bit difficult to watch at times, but it does make for compelling viewing, I have to admit. Just please be careful, lads, yeah? Please be careful. Towards the end of the match, Naito treated Ibushi with his customary level of disdain, really, spitting in his face, and Ibushi turned around and you could see his features just darkening, and he was like, I'm going to kick the crap out of this guy right now. Turned around, blasted him with some huge strikes, and then Naito, probably like knowing that this was going to anger Ibushi and take him off his game, was able to hit a thunderous Destino, and Ibushi kicked out one of the best near falls of the entire night. Ibushi then countered a second attempt at Destino, which, if you don't know, is Naito's finisher, and then hit 2 Bomb IAs, Nakamura's old finisher, which he still uses in WWE as the Kinshasa, but Ibushi's kind of adopted it in New Japan. He hit him with 2 of those, Naito kicked out. He hit him with the last ride, Naito kicked out. Then he hit him with the big knee, and Naito didn't kick out. And Kota Ibushi is the new IC champion. What's next for Naito? Will he go up the card because he's got no title now, or will he go further down the card? It's hard to tell, but whatever happens, Naito remains one of the most over guys consistently in New Japan. The crowd was so hot for him, but Ibushi looks great too, and I think this could be a key stepping stone in the New Japan career of Kota Ibushi. Next up, the penultimate match of the night, the triple threat ladder match for the Ring of Honor World Championship, pitting the champion Jay Lethal against 2 challengers, Marty Scurll and Matt Taven. This was again another one of those matches that I thought, this might be a bit more of a lackluster one, which actually exceeded my expectations. Again, it wasn't like the best match on the card, but it was very entertaining, pretty much from start to finish actually. It was a little bit spotty, like some ladder matches are guilty of being, with guys clearly setting up future spots in a way that doesn't quite look entirely realistic, but the moments in between those spots may have been a bit telegraphed, but the big moments themselves did feel big, and every single one of them impacted with the crowd, and in a ladder match, that's a really good feature to have. These big moments included like a chicken wing on top of the ladder from Marty Scurll, or Lethal being thrown from the apron onto a prone ladder on the ramp, which was brutal. Also, Matt Taven got a big purple ladder, purple being like the theme of his Kingdom stable. Big purple ladder from under the ring, which was taller than all the other ladders, set it up near the ladder in the middle and kind of scaled it, and then things kind of escalated from there. Other ladders kind of got slotted into the purple ladder, making some sort of like ladder bridge contraption. You've seen it before if you've watched certain Money in the Bank ladder matches. And Taven took out Marty Scurll with a chair shot and then climbed the ladder. He and Lethal were battling atop the ladder just underneath the Ring of Honor World Championship. And I can't quite remember, but I think Taven hit Lethal with the belt itself, and Lethal fell from the ladder onto one of the ladder bridges, which was a brutal bump to take. Well done, Jay, for doing that. And then Taven pulled down the title, and he's the new Ring of Honor World Champion. That's a big call. I should mention as well that at one point in the match, there were 2 ladders that became kind of crossed over like an X shape kind of in the middle of the ring, and Lethal got rid of them and threw them to the outside, and one of them nearly hit a fan in the front row. I think he was fine. If you watch this event, you'll have noticed that fan was getting more and more drunk as the show went on, so I think he was just having a pretty good time in the front row. Fair play to him. Please be okay. And finally, after all that craziness, we had the main event, the IWGP Heavyweight Championship match between Jay White, the champion, and the winner of the New Japan Cup and #1 contender, Kazuchika Okada. This was the archetypal New Japan main event style match, a match which started slowly with both men getting to know each other, locking up, exchanging holds and stuff, and then escalating the action until by the end, everyone's on the edge of their seats. It was a match that I thought, oh, have I got one more big match left in me to watch, because this has been such a long show, and by the end of it, I was fully hooked. So there were various things in this match that were really compelling, especially as it wore on, especially with both guys countering each other's finishes, or Gedo trying to get involved on the outside, so Okada basically chucked both him and Jay White over one of the crowd barriers, and then did his big diving crossbody over the crowd barrier and took both out. That was a really cool moment to see. And yeah, both guys really gave the impression of knowing each other's game quite well. There was a lot of counters here, which harked back to their match at Wrestle Kingdom, which of course Jay White shockingly won. There was also a huge near fall as Jay White kicked out of 2 consecutive Rainmakers, then a bit later on hit the Blade Runner on Okada, and if he'd made the cover, I think the implication was that he would have won, but he was too tired to actually make that cover, and Okada was able to recover in time. Then eventually Okada hit another Rainmaker, then a Tombstone, then another Rainmaker, and won back the IWGP Heavyweight Championship. What's going to happen next, I do not know, but what a match to end things like on a high note with. And to be honest, even though it was a long and grueling show, I enjoyed the vast majority of it. I thought it was well worthwhile. So that is what happened at the New Japan Pro Wrestling / Ring of Honor G1 Supercard. A night of good matches, 1 or 2 bad matches, a lot of controversy, and a lot of big game-changing results. I'd recommend it. I'm really tired as well, but thank you very much for watching. Thanks very much for watching, and let us know what you think in the comments section down below. You can follow Cultaholic on Twitter at Cultaholic and on Facebook at facebook.com/Cultaholic. If you enjoy what we do, then please do check out our Patreon, patreon.com/Cultaholic, where you can pledge. And don't forget, of course, most importantly of all, to hit subscribe and to join us.